Welcome to the Patient Perspective, brought to you by Volteface, with myself, Paul, my good friend and colleague, Katya Kowalski, and we've got a new good friend of ours, Kieran. Hello. Welcome to the show. Welcome to
Thank you
our
very much
show.
for having
How are
me.
you doing, my friend?
Thank you. I'm doing great. I'm nervous, excited, but very nervous.
There's nothing to be nervous about with us too.
Yeah, we're
Exploring a
friendly.
subject that we all know very well, and care about deeply. We've been talking for a little bit, haven't we, about how we can do more on the channel to better, I guess, educate and inform the industry of some of the challenges that patients are experiencing, but also give patients a voice. Katya and I care deeply about patient experience, and we think a lot about how the industry can better engage with patients, and also how we can use the Volteface platform to better amplify what's taking place in the patient community. So this is what we're going to be doing on this show with yourself, Kieran, and we're going to be talking about and exploring some of the issues that patients are facing, some of the things that are going well, some of the things that maybe not going so well, and each episode we're also going to get into a particular subject. Today's subject, we're going to talk about stigma and how like venues, entertainment venues, just places out in the public sphere are interacting with people who are using medication completely legally. And we've all seen some of the crazy stuff that venues put out, haven't we? We've all seen just wacky notices. You can't bring this in here, blah blah blah. Just basically illegal comms and messaging. So we're gonna talk about that. But first of all, I just want to welcome you to the show, Kieran, and ask how's your week going, mate? How are you keeping?
It's going really good. Yeah, it's very busy at the minute. Things are picking up in the cannabis space and in the UK. Yeah, lots and lots going on.
You were doing a superb. Well, maybe we should just spend a little time just getting people to know who you are. Although most people will probably see this for the first time.
I can do my
We'll probably know, but
little spiel.
you know, we know you through your work at the MCPA, which you can talk about and do a little intro on, and your superb YouTube series, which is not only really informative and honest and from the heart educational, but is also absolutely hilarious. You are so funny on that YouTube show. It's right up my street in terms of like the style of comedy and editing. So yeah, give us a little bit of background, mate. What are you up to in the space? What are you working on?
Yeah, so yeah, my name's Kieran. I'm from God in the Grass, a YouTube channel that is devoted to bringing awareness about medical cannabis in the UK, but also bringing education just through talking about my personal experience with medical cannabis. My personal experience is actually very limited. Wasn't, I didn't have very much experience with cannabis before becoming a patient. I'd had some use, but not a lot. So I'm still very new to this space myself. Been a patient for nearly 2 years now. And yeah, so I just share different strains, different products that we've got at the moment. I talk about the different rights that we have. I talk about a lot about the stigma that we're going to move on to, but also I work in an organization called the Medical Cannabis Patients Association, or the MCPA. And yeah, so I'm a trustee there, or they're calling me a co-founder now, but I don't know how I feel about that one. But we are there for patients every single day. We have a Discord where we're there to help with patients' problems. We will call the clinic for you and try and get it sorted, or we are out there trying to change the law, change the stigma, change the you know what's going on with venues and stuff like that. But we're there for patients weekly. We do Zooms Sunday and Friday at 2 p.m. just to hang out, vape, chill, tell us your problems. Wednesday's a bit more formal, tell us your problems as well. Let's see if we can handle them and how we're going to go about it. And then once a month we have a industry rep meeting where we take patients' questions and we put them to the industry themselves. So you can find out all the information for that on mcpa.uk.
Now, this will go out on like multiple channels like Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, or stuff. But if I can, I'll put all the details in the description. So it'll either be, if it's Twitter, it'll be underneath on the thread. If it's LinkedIn, it'll be in the comments. So it's YouTube, it'll be in the description. But we'll link all of this so people can find more, and we'll link your channel as well, Kieran, which is
Lots
great.
of shout outs. Yeah, I love how organized the MCPA is, like with you've got the Sundays and the Tuesdays and the Wednesdays meeting. It's really, really nice to see such nice organization and structure for a patient group. So yeah, you guys are doing really, really good work.
Okay.
And you positively engage in the industry is ace. You know, a lot of patient groups in the past have, you know, rightly criticised the industry and continue to do so, which is fine. People should be absolutely allowed to express their views, belief, opinions on it, and many of it has been well founded, justified. But you're the first group I think that's like actively and positively engaging the industry and getting them around the table and being like, come speak to patients, like come on a Zoom call with us, like come and talk to us and take questions, rather than just being separated and staying away from it. So I think that's
you can be critical without being divisive.
definitely.
I think there's enough.
Yeah,
100%.
yeah.
I think trying to bring us together, regardless of what the end goal is for everyone, we all have something in common.
I think there's a lot of room for like collaboration and just all chatting on a call and seeing what work can be done, because I think there's a lot more to unite the industry and the sector than divide it. I think we tend to think we have less in common than we do.
Definitely. The format we're going to use on these shows is we're going to kind of talk about what patient, like the kind of news, like patient related news, and we're going to talk about that first, and then we're going to move on to that second subject. So let's get into the first thing, which was, what are the main discussions and updates that have been taking place in the patient community? And Kim, we'll kind of start with you, because you're incredibly well tapped into things that have been said on your Discord and things that have been said online. So what are the kind of like, what are the themes and main things that have come up recently for patients?
Yeah, so there's still a lot of issues that patients face, whether it be with the industry or the public or the law or the government. But the overwhelming concern, worry for patients at the moment is the stigma. There's the driving aspect, which I think Guy Coxall from Pseudo Future and Sanskara put out a booklet. I think they first handed that out at the conference. My wife is a new driver. She just got a license, and she's also a patient. And she absolutely fears, that she'll be stopped one day, for just taking a medicine and doing so unimpaired and responsibly. But these handbooks and stuff, they're great and they're really helping out. But patients are still so fearful because of the lack of education and the awareness just surrounding medical cannabis in general within police forces. So I mean, public use is another very big one that comes up a lot. We are actively trying to, if I can, a little bit talk about it. We're trying to normalize it, which is a campaign that the MCPA are running at the moment. We haven't quite got it off the ground publicly at the moment, just because we're after some funding. But we are putting out packs, pamphlets, something that we can send to venues explaining our position and explaining, that this medicine is legal since 2018. You do have the right to use your medication without being discriminated on the basis of what medication that is or how it's administered. But also just to give some kind of clarity to business owners and stuff like that, to educate them, to just spread the word as well. And hopefully what they'll do is they'll put a sticker on the front of their wall, much like the sunflower lanyard for the people with hidden disabilities. It's going to be something that just signifies that patients are welcome here. Please use your medicine. Please do so responsibly. Please just, feel free. Don't feel like you have to ask for that amendment, that adjustment, and just feel that this venue has got your back. So that's something that's we're working on. But yeah, it's stigma.
You'd say that's the most kind of common, when you're talking to patients and looking at a Discord, then that's kind of like the most common discussion or challenge that comes up. It's that facing stigma out in the public and kind of concerns around that. That's kind of the number one.
Yeah, it's up there. There's a lot of issues, but that is definitely up there. It's up for me personally when it comes to the venues and the travel, because personally I can't travel without the use of my medication. So quite often I will have to forego the use of public transport and have to find other means. And on that note, I mean, a lot of the time there's patients that will say, well, fair enough, you should wait. But then there's the patients that can't wait and need to use their medication regularly. There's a patient that I spoke to recently who needs to get to her biopsy appointment to see if she's got cancer, and she can't because none of the public transport operators in the local area will let her use her medication on board, will make that reasonable adjustment. And she's at the point where she says, I may as well wait for an ambulance, but even that'll take 2 hours. It's very difficult at the moment, and people, it goes very unnoticed.
How much stigma do you think still exists within the industry itself? So what I'm referring, look at that, getting that mug in.
I want that mug.
It kind of undercuts everything I'm saying.
And I guess I'm referring to kind of like
within the
interactions with doctors, kind of like staff that work at clinics. That because what we're going to move on to talk about in a second is that broader stigma that exists out in there in the public, and just the challenge and the stress engaged with that. But what in your experience have you kind of seen, or what's your feeling of in the industry, that stigma?
Within the medical cannabis industry itself and the care that we receive, there's still a number of things that get brought up. One is amount, and that still falls into the stigma and the patient on patient stigma, is that there are patients that genuinely might need more monthly than I do. There is no legal limit for the amount of medical cannabis that you can be prescribed monthly. It's 30 days at a time. But there is patients who might need more than, say, I do, but they still face a lot of stigma in patient communities and the public as the old, well, you're just a stoner, you're hoarding you've got all the flour in the world. And it's not. They are using it regularly because they have to, because their needs demand it, because their doctor has prescribed it.
What do you think we can do about
that? Awareness. I think very much just awareness and making ourselves front and center to the public, is just showing that this is perfectly normal for us. This is how we live our lives, and maybe you should treat it as normal as we do. And that's the only way I think the public are going to catch up.
Great. Katya, you did a lot of work, didn't you, on this subject, talking to clinicians about stigma. Do you feel like it's got better since the time we've worked together and you've been in?
Yeah, I think so. Because I wrote a report called Known Unknowns, which I interviewed like over 40 doctors around their barriers and hesitations and just kind of general opinions on medical cannabis. And all of the clinicians I interviewed were able to prescribe cannabis but chose not to, or the vast majority of them. And yeah, I mean the interviews I had with them, some of them were very interesting, like bizarre conversations around.
Some of the stuff they said.
And Kieran, you mentioned like lack of just education and awareness, and that was rife in the clinical community. I had a doctor ask whether cannabis was a berry, which is definitely a first.
It exists within the industry, but it's very prevalent within the NHS as well. That much is very true for myself as well. So it kind of falls into the category of like the public use, but not really. There's patients that can't use their medicine within hospitals. That should be the very one place that you should be able to use the medicine that you're being prescribed. But for my personal experience, I couldn't access mental health services at the beginning of my treatment because so many of them still see it as this addictive substance, even though it was helping me get off of other addictive substances that were actually much more
harmful. And the fact that it's prescribed by a clinician, no, I think
they're just not aware.
Yeah, I think
Sorry, mate.
Oh no, I was just going to say, I think like in terms of like the private healthcare clinical community, like outside of the cannabis clinic, so not the kind of well-known clinicians in the industry, I do think that it is changing and people are becoming more interested. We've done a lot of kind of engagement around those groups, and there is, I think, interest, even if they're not necessarily prescribing it, they're becoming a lot more aware of the fact that like, medical cannabis patients exist. But yeah, I think in the NHS, definitely that's just like it still feels very foreign. I know whenever I go for like a GP checkup or some appointment, they're always like, "Oh, what do you do?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, I work in the medical cannabis industry," and like just chatting to them, and their eyes are like, "Oh my god,
what is going on?"
So,
does work in a dispensary or help me out?
There's groups doing really good work in like MCCS doing a lot of work of training doctors. We've done a bunch of kind of like private roundtables with clinicians, and I know some clinics are better than others, but I think there is a concerted effort to try and make sure that clinicians understand the varying needs. But I mean, Katya and I still hear mumblings and feedback and kind of see doctors who maybe don't always quite understand the varying use. And there's definitely a tension there, isn't there, that Kieran, you've outlined really well, which sits around people's stigma of amount. So people can be like, oh, if it's that much, then it must just be recreational. Like, who would want that? And there's just a misperception of the individuality
I
of
don't
cannabis
choose the
prescribing.
amount that I'm prescribed. Yeah. I'm prescribed the amount that I need, and that's what the sentence that I hear the most in our community that upsets me the most is, just because you can doesn't mean you should, when in actuality it's because I should that I can.
Exactly.
It's I am in need of this. There's patients that are still having to, and they won't, people won't admit this, but there's plenty of patients that I'm aware of that, because of their doctors, understandings around cannabis and refusal to prescribe more than what they're currently prescribing, the patients are still often having to source it from illicit means. And that's something that we should be moving away for. If a patient needs that amount, they should be getting it the safe way.
Yeah, agree 100%. One thing that we've talked about a bit recently that I think is a really relevant and interesting news subject is that kind of like the challenge, and I'd love to hear your take on it, Kieran. The challenge that exists for patients in finding out accurate information around dosage and pattern of use, because it kind of buys into a similar thing, doesn't it? People have lots of assumptions over how much is too much or what someone should need based on their own experience, but it's such an individualized experience that I sometimes worry that certain places where people get their information can be compromised, in the sense that it should be taken with a pinch of salt and is quite biased, and instead it's about your relationship with your doctor and also your relationship with the medication.
Yeah, because
rather than what does this group say, or what does that group say?
Yeah,
It's
because
very individualistic.
it's such an individual medicine, and I think you see it on like online forums, in the Reddit forum and Twitter, around patients putting out reviews of certain medications and products, and then and then people disagreeing, and it's like, well, this medicine might work really well for this patient, but it might not work well for you, and vice versa. And someone might have a terrible experience with the product, but doesn't mean it's a bad product. It means it might just not work for your endocannabinoid system and your condition. So I feel like there's a lot of there
there's not enough freedom of information, in my opinion, as well, because I know a patient who suffers with strong allergies to limonene, and so they are struggling quite often to find strains that are low in limonene, and just having access to that information and accurate information that should be freely available to us. If we're spending so much on these products, I think we should have the knowledge of what's in them.
That's such a good point. There should be way more clarity around terpene profiles and just everything that you could possibly know from a testing perspective about the medicine. It would be so good if there was more transparency there. I mean, definitely. I guess there is a challenge at the moment with MedBud wikis now becoming kind of which historically I guess is where you would get a lot of that information contained, but now I know you need to register to get on the platform. So I guess there are some barriers in getting that information, but I think some clinics and some cultivators do better than others, don't they, in terms of getting that information out there. I kind of Kieran, go on, mate. No, go on, make your point.
Right. I feel like I've talked quite a lot, but I'll try not to. From personal experience, it's a bit of a potluck with the clinic that will provide that information freely to the patient. I think that it should be mandatory across all clinics. I think that if you're paying for that care, you should have access to the information about that care. The difficulty is with MedBud is that you often will have you will often have people that are not yet patients, who are prospective patients. They're people who want to learn more and find out more information in places like MedBud. For me personally, to give MedBud all the credit, when I first started, it was the place that I found all the information, that I understood more about my rights. It wasn't just about prices, it was about the information that's on there as well that's so important. But yeah, I think it's a difficult one where to strike, because obviously there's the MHRA thing and not advertising medicines and products, and then also the public having access to this information as well, as not just paying patients, because ultimately we need more patients.
That's where the tension sits, isn't it? I think Katya and I have spoken loads over the past I don't know, many years, about how cannabis-based medicines don't really fit into our existing healthcare setting, but they also don't fit into, or very well, into our existing perceptions and the reality of medicine. Do you know what I mean? Cannabis is very, unique in a sense that it is a very individualistic experience and it is a complex medicine, yet we'll try to fit it into this kind of box of like, oh, it's always just up to the clinician and they know best, and it's just kind of this one-way process. It doesn't really work like that, does it? There's no other medicine that you would receive for a condition where you're even thinking about a level of complexity that a terpene profile would have. Do you know what I mean? There is just no other medicine where you'd be going to the doctor, oh, give me all this additional information to help me make my decision. They'd be like, oh no, it's just the name of the drug. I just prescribe you it. Do you know what I mean? It's Adderall. You just get Adderall.
And just the wide variety of
Yeah.
products that are available for medical cannabis patients. I mean, the UK market, still isn't even that big. And you look at, on MedBud, the amount of products that are available to patients, and you compare that to like any other kind of drug. It's the drug that you're prescribed, and then it just depends on the dosage and like the how often you're prescribed it. Whereas for cannabis, there's such a wide variety of them. So yeah, no wonder it's like confusing and complex.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
We're going to do this show regularly. In ongoing shows, we'll kind of take a closer eye and commentary on some of the things that are taking place in the sector. But Karen, I think that gives a really good idea of, I guess, the ongoing challenge of stigma that comes up, and some of those issues around relationships that people have with each other in the community, and kind of assumptions and stigma that even exists just within the cannabis industry, but also outside of it. And I guess the outside of it bit is the main thing we kind of wanted to jump into and talk about on the show, have as like our main discussion point. And that is like, why is 2018, the law was changed, and yet we're still coming across venues and organizations that are kind of banning people using illegally prescribed medicine on their premises, which appears to be an illegal move on their part to say you can't use this medicine.
It's discrimination against the Equality Act of 2010.
Yeah, but
it is. I personally feel like it is. I feel like I have kind of gained something on one hand and lost something with another. I've on the one hand gained medicine that is life-changing and allows me to live my life with some level of enjoyment now. And on the other hand, it's more difficult for me to ever visit venues or access travel. It already was to begin with, and now this has just added an extra layer of fear whenever I leave, my doorstep.
Yeah, it's a scary. Me and you have talked about before, Kieran. Like even when a venue is sort of like, oh yeah, no, it's fine. There's still that thing of like, yeah, but now I've got to like, now I've got to explain to someone on the door. There's still that fear that something's going to happen, or there's going to be an assumption, and like you just talked about that specific case study. Public transport is a scary process. Just thinking, I'm not going to be able to use my medicine for X amount of time, whether it be on a long bus ride or a train ride or whatever. It can put people in a situation where they're essentially unable to travel, or can only travel if they're deeply unwell. How much? I mean, I guess we're kind of aware of that issue. I guess what we want to be doing is thinking about what are some of the solutions. How do we get around this? And one that's always come to me, and I know it's not the perfect solution, and in some ways it's kind of sidestepping a broader issue. So I wouldn't pin all my hopes on this. I just think it's an interesting, I guess, evolution and way of addressing the problem, and that is like the diversification of how the medicine's consumed. So I guess vaping obviously is the most common method of consumption, but maybe the industry should, or we as an industry and community should be thinking about how. And again, this doesn't justify the stigma at all. I think that is also a massive issue. But maybe if there was more diversification of ways in which the medicine could be used, someone could go, okay, if there is a long bus journey, maybe it would be an edible or a tablet or whatever else. From a patient perspective, I know it's not perfect, and it doesn't address the stigma, but do you think that maybe is something the industry could explore, or do we need to just
or how receptive?
I agree, and personally, I think you shouldn't be discriminated on the basis of what medicine you take. I mean, I agree. I've tried the oils, and I'm just saying, I've tried oils, I've tried other methods. It's what works best for you, and it's what your doctor prescribes. Really, I think the method in which we change public perception is because the legislative structure is already there. Don't get me wrong. I honestly feel like the government has massively failed us on the infrastructure of how they implemented medical cannabis to patients in 2018. But the legislation is already there to allow patients to use medication in these, transport and public venues. I think although it's going to upset a lot of members of the public, and it's going to probably upset members in our own community, and it's going to cause a lot of division, it's also going to invoke a lot of conversation if we go out there and proudly use our medicine. It is terrifying. So I'm not encouraging people to go out there and be irresponsible and put the public at risk. But I do feel like if you are genuinely in need of this medication, you should take it as and when your doctor has prescribed you to take it.
Yeah, I agree, mate. I agree completely. I wish we had a understanding of cannabis in the general public, which just meant that wasn't even a thing, that you had to kind of do that call to action and try and say to people, get there and
yeah.
use it.
Well, it's the same with, I don't want to try and compare it to other issues, but it's kind of similar with disabilities in the sense that, somebody who might not have wheelchair access, or for example, my wife who's also disabled and needs, ramps or whatever it is, or lifts or something, if there's not that access there, then you shouldn't have to shout it out, look for a member of staff, or go out of your way to ensure that adjustment is there for you. If you make a bit of a fuss about it, eventually that establishment has to put that reasonable adjustment in place for everyone. So it's not something that you have to ask for. It's just there, and you're not putting the public at risk. You're not upsetting anyone. You're not putting anyone in an uncomfortable situation or at a disadvantage. You already have that same advantage everybody else does, is to use that space.
Yeah, it's like what you said with the venues. Like you shouldn't have to like explain and kind of explain your kind of reasoning and what your situation is, just to be allowed to do something that should be a misnomer. Like if someone's at a pub or like a cultural event or a concert and they've got any other sort of drug prescribed to them legally, they can just take it there and then, and it's not an issue. Or if someone's got asthma and they use their inhaler.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't have the same issue with my inhaler or a spacer attached to it. I don't expect somebody to be called out for injecting themselves with insulin.
Yeah.
If they need it, that they take it.
I'm just playing devil's advocate, because I agree with everything that's said, and I guess my point around the technological innovation is it doesn't address the problem, but it might just buy people a bit of freedom whilst we continue to battle the stigma. Do you know what I mean? Because I think the two, like the stigma
absolutely
needs addressing, and Katya and I have thought a lot about even just the word. It's a shame that there's just like the word cannabis, like it's medical cannabis, instead of like, think about magic mushrooms, it's now psilocybin. Well, it's not. It's always been psilocybin, but it kind of just becomes a name that people then don't have stigma attached to. What do you think we can do? What initiatives can we do then, Kieran? Or what stuff are you thinking about as a way of pushing back against this, particularly some of those venues? What actions can we take?
So just on your point about, how it's administered or the form it comes in, I want to really stress, if I could, I wouldn't be taking, this medicine. If I didn't, need to be taking cannabis in the form that I take it in, the flower that it comes in the jar, whatever, I wouldn't, because of all the stigma that's attached to it. That is what's best for me as a patient. That's what's best for some other people. If that other form works for them, then absolutely. If they can take that other form and it can get them through the day without having to use something that might cause them anxiety in public, then by all means. Sorry, I've forgotten what you're
No, it's good. I'm glad you made that point. It's a good point. I just asked, what can we do? What actions have you been thinking of, or initiatives that might be underway that could help push back and maybe get out some of those venues and better prepare and educate them on this issue that patients are facing?
Yeah, so it would just come back to that Normalise It campaign. I know that we're not the only one that have got this same agenda. We're not the only one that's got the same ideas. We all want to try and make it normal for public use. And I think doing that as responsibly as we can. I just want to keep reiterating it. We do have to be responsible and, push boundaries, but respectfully within the law. I think that's how we do it. I think we have to push those boundaries.
Agree. Because I think when you get out to these venues and you actually get in front of people and you explain and you speak to them, then I think you bring people on a journey. I don't think once you present people with the evidence, they go, well, I'm still not allowing it. I think they go, oh, wow.
Yeah,
okay,
like, oh, amazing. I didn't realize.
Yeah, because 2018, the government. Well, I mean, you could point fingers all over the place, really, but we just didn't bring people on a journey. It was just like flash in the pan campaigning, sudden change out of nowhere, and then the public sort of like just assumed it's CBD. So,
Yeah, we've been fending for our own accessibility, which is not right. When we're patients and we're some of the most vulnerable people in society, and we're struggling to do all these campaigns and struggling to find the time. It's one of my part-time jobs, but the other part-time job is looking after my own health and my own well-being. It's sad that we've got to fend for our own accessibility, but I'm excited. I think things are going to change. I think things are going to progress. You know, it's positive here, stuff like Katya was saying earlier.
Definitely. And we'll
Yeah.
use this as a platform, Kieran, together to just raise some of these issues and just be honest and open about what people are experiencing, and just have this as an invite for anyone that we all come across to just share with us what they're experiencing, some of the challenges. And we're just going to say how it is. Katya and I do this on the Industry News Show, and we're just very honest. If we see something that we think is a problem, we just say
raise
what we
it
think
and explore kind of how we can address it. I think it's quite nice to have this open forum for exploring, you know, what these patient issues are and what we do about it, what the different perspectives are, like with the mode of administration and the kind of impact that has on stigma.
Definitely. And I look forward to hearing more about that initiative, Kieran. I think that sounds cool, mate. Sounds good. Sounds really good. I think that gives I think for a first opening episode, we've hit a half-hour mark, which is always a perfect slot, I think, time wise for this sort of thing. There's that mug again.
I want one like a Miss Weed.
my wife got it. I think she got it just after I'm a patient.
Oh, I love it.
Nice. Cool. Kieran, Katya, thanks so much for doing the show. Appreciate both. Good inputs and discussions. We'll be doing this again, and
really appreciate it.
Thanks everyone for watching. Catch you next time.